Hi, and welcome everyone. Kayla Lopez here with Military Friendly. Super excited for our conversation today. We have a very special guest with us that we have the honor that she come in and talk to us a little bit about some of the work that she's doing in the military spouse space. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to our special guest, Karla. Karla Langham is a first generation Latina, military spouse, and Texas native. She's a huge advocate for service members, veterans, and their families. She's currently serving in a dual-halted role as the politically appointed senior advisor and chief of staff to the Honorable James Rodriguez, the Assistant Secretary for the Department of Labor, Veteran Employment and Training Services. And prior to this role, she worked with Hiring Our Heroes through the Chamber of Commerce Foundation, where she led the Amplify program, which was a really cool 2-day intensive professional development workshop where she connected military spouses to meaningful career opportunities. And so, with that being said, we are really excited to pick your brain, Karla, about some of the great work you're doing in the military spouse space to provide opportunity and economic advancement for military spouses. So, Karla, welcome. Tell us about you.
Hi, Keela. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that intro. I don't know what else there's left to tell. That's really it. But I am a military spouse. Well, not active duty. My husband retired a couple years ago. I kind of got introduced to the space through actually the Hiring Our Heroes platform, the Amplify program. It was the first time that someone had sat me down and said, "Stop defaulting to different careers and start designing your careers," which was just kind of opened my eyes. I was really frustrated hearing that at first, and kind of led me down this path where I started telling my story better. Naval spouse, I moved 12 times in 13 years. I actually was just reading some data about that. Every time you PCS, you're less likely to hold a job or keep a job. So that very much bodes well with my path. I'm originally from Texas, Houston, Texas at that. And then the first duty station I went to was Hawaii. Then went to Charleston and bounced back and forth across the country, learning different things about our great nation. I eventually went and got my master's in public administration in Monterey, California. Had two kids under two when I did that, and my husband was getting his master's as well. So it was a good, interesting, fun time, and I really enjoyed doing that. I found my way here post Hiring Our Heroes, met the Honorable James Rodriguez, and he gave me the opportunity to come here and have a seat at the table to affect change for military spouses and bring that voice to the table, which is what I told him in my interview was there's no military spouse sitting at the table navigating and driving change that we need. So thank you for having me.
Now there is.
For sure.
And it's
I don't
so
know if he
fantastic
regrets that.
with that. Well, hats off to you for doing all of those things with two little ones in the house and BCSing, right? You have your hands full. That's probably the biggest understatement ever. So, big question, right? So, recently, well, I guess in the past 10 to 12 years, right, Department of Labor and the government has done a really good job in, starting to provide resources for military spouses and noticing that, that there are some gaps there. Things like Hiring Heroes has done things, obviously, that you were part of, the MSEP initiative, right, joining forces. As part of the DOL's team and some of the work that you're doing there, can you give me a little bit more about some of the recent initiatives you guys have been working on and sort of where those driving forces are and what's the motivation behind them? We know what the motivation is, right? But like, who is really leading it?
Yeah, so there are a lot of great things going on. And one, I don't think people really understand what Department of Labor does writ large. As I like to say it, is they really wrap their arms around all American workers and they want to support them morning, noon, and night. And as you know, some of Biden's initiatives are building the middle class out, right? So we want to make sure that we're empowering our workers to have childcare, to make sure that if they are part of these marginalized groups and offsets that military spouses are a part of, they're getting that support. So I didn't know until I started working here that military spouses are considered a dislocated worker or a displaced homemaker. So what that means is every time you move, if you set foot into one of our American job centers, we have about 2,500 of them across the country. Um, Set foot in them, they will wrap their arms around you. They will see where you're at and either get you some upskilling and reskilling so that they can put you into those high critical needs in your area. It really is a community-based approach. So they come in and they try to make sure that those military spouses are getting the work that they need. They will also, those dollars upskill, reskill you go as far as getting you not only just training, but childcare dollars are involved in that. So these are your WIOA dollars. Interview close, we paid bills before, we've paid light bills, floated them. And then outside of that, looking more directly at what we do here at VETS, we have teams. So that's the transition employment assistance for military spouses. And you can find that on our website. So teams it's just different modules that you can go through. We go over like your elevator pitch, your resume, how to find a federal job, and they're at your own pace and whenever you can achieve them, because we know those childcare is really difficult. So you do it at your own pace, help write your resume. We also offer the Employment Navigator Partner Program. We are realizing, and I think this is across the board, DoD, VA, and DOL, that if we don't have the spouse next to the active duty service member when it's time to start transitioning out, there are going to be a lot of gaps in that, right? You know, we make a lot of the decisions while they're gone. We're the ones looking up things. What's next? Where are we moving to? Finding just the simplest things at your next duty station. We do the same when you're transitioning out. What does that look like? So we're looking at VA benefits ahead of time. We're looking at all the employment and veteran resources that are out there and making sure that they get connected. Government has seen that, and we want to make sure that military spouses are a part of that conversation now. So if you're transitioning out of the military, your spouse is eligible to also participate in ENPP. And so you will meet with an employment navigator on a base. And this is addition to TAP, and it's optional. Meet with an employment navigator, and then they'll start connecting you to where you're moving to. So you'll start connecting with your American Job Center in that area, as well as any nonprofits that are near and dear to that, to wherever you're moving to, in order to get you connected and get you those resources. There are a ton of nonprofits and resources out there, and it's like swimming through it to find what's best for you. We also have OBTT, it's off-base transition training. And so those are for our veterans who are later down the line, who once they retired or transitioned out, now need kind of that help again. We will reevaluate them and get them their resume services. We'll connect them to our American Job Centers and also try to find them upskilling, reskilling opportunities and get them back into the workforce. Veteran spouses are also eligible to participate in that because we understand the gaps in their employment as well. So if a veteran spouse is looking to get back into the workforce, those are some of the tools that we have out there for them. And then there's a whole other myriad of things that we're doing with joining forces. We were able to help support during the licensing law that was it came in the dead of night, is what I like to call it. It was a little Easter egg that came into the NDAA 2023, which allowed for all military spouses to transition, except for lawyers, which is really weird, across state lines. So they could take their license, no matter what it was, except for lawyers, really rude, across all state lines, and the next state will have to accept that license and give them the new one for that state. And the great thing about that is you have the full force of the Department of Justice. They have sued on behalf of military spouses in Texas and won. This is law now. We know that each state may start having some issue with it. So we're working through all that, but hopefully soon we'll have some better messaging for everyone.
Karla, I can't wait to go into full detail on that, right? And pick your brain totally. There's so much to wrap around that. So question for you. You know, the military spouse unemployment rate has remained at, that 18 to 20% mark. And, resources are being bolstered and initiatives are being bolstered, but stubbornly, we can't get that number down, right? So in your opinion, what do you feel are some of the contributing factors that are causing such a high jobless rate?
Yeah. And, Karla Langham's opinion, and I never came into this position really having one way or another. I think it's really important that we need to have military spouse employment protections. One, as it stands, military spouses don't self-identify. Under the Obama administration as well, we saw that with veterans. Veterans would not self-identify, which was part of the Joining Forces initiatives. And kind of looking through that, they were looking at how do we start protecting them and making sure that they have that safe space to say that I'm a veteran. And then secondly, I think it's just we're doing a great job of educating and informing. What does it mean to be a military spouse? What does that mean for my bottom line? Is this person going to move in 2 years? And educating them on millennials, Gen Zers, and so forth. They leave jobs after 2 years, a year and a half. I think the average is actually going down. And so looking at hiring a military spouse, being a part of a minority group, you're going to do very well because you want to make an impact for yourself, not just for yourself, but the entire population. I want you to hire a military spouse again, right? So we are really working towards that. But at the end of the day, we need options, leave without pay options. We need to protect military spouse employment so that we're not being discriminated against. I've heard stories all over the place. The most recent one I heard was a woman who she went to an interview and she had her wedding announcement was sitting on top of the hiring manager's desk. So she knew that she was a military spouse. Right. It is crazy. And they were like, well, you're going to leave us. And she was like, I'm pretty sure that was illegal, but it isn't because we're not a protected class.
Yeah, there may be a rule around that one.
I don't know, right? We don't know. Who do you go to? And I always say that we don't really have an agency that is just military spouse, so who even investigates that? Who do you go to? So I really do think we need to start thinking through how do we change things legislatively. There are only 600,000 military spouses, and that includes Guard and Reserve spouses. It's a drop in the bucket to protect them, but it has a huge impact in our readiness and retention. So I think it's a little thing that could go a long way.
Absolutely. There's a lot of talk. We always mention meaningful careers, right? Um, in your opinion, what do you feel that means when it comes to military spouse employment and gaining meaning, going into a meaningful career field or gaining, experience in a meaningful career? What exactly is that? Because I mean, meaningful career could mean a lot of things for a lot of different people, right? Is it just a monetary, checkbox? Is it, you're meeting the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So what is it, in your opinion, that makes,
Yeah, and it's awesome that you asked that. We actually have a good jobs initiative here at Department of Labor. And so the Biden administration has invested a lot of dollars in our infrastructure across the country. Dollars for chips manufacturing, you name it, cyber, these high critical roles that we need to function in society. We just don't have enough workers. And so part of that is the ball is kind of in our court. So if you're looking to get federal dollars for your project, we're now embedding in different languages and encouraging different agencies to write this in there to embed good quality jobs. So that means access to childcare. That means those wraparound services for not just for military spouses, but for all, right? And making sure that you have good benefits. You have a safe place to go morning, noon, and night. Again, like from the moment you wake up in the morning, you are good to go for work. You have everything you need, right? You have your safety equipment. You have all of it. So, and we know that for military families, childcare is one of the number one issues, and I should say for women everywhere. I think that is our biggest issue. We kind of carry the weight of that.
Absolutely. You guys are lucky over at Department of Labor, you have your own child care center. It's fantastic. But in that same lane and vein, there are lots of challenges, right, that a military spouse faces, when it comes to careers. You've got PCSing, you've got the child care issues and, other things. So is there anything currently being done by any of the administration's initiatives or Department of Labor's programs that help sort of provide resources for some of those challenges? I know you talked about a few, but just off the top of your head, what resources can you give us more information on around those areas?
Yeah, so I think right now one of the biggest pushes is making government the choice to work at, right? The employment, we want to be the best, right, in the government. And Biden administration and joining forces have signed a few executive orders that help support that. So one of them is ensuring that we're looking at all veteran programs that we have across the government, the entire enterprise, and seeing how we can maybe fit military spouses in there. Again, going back to like, we're just not written anywhere in legislation, so it's really difficult to do that, but the administration kind of can start weaving some of those in there. Giving military spouses hiring preferences is another thing that they have been doing. The DOL program that was just signed, so that's, oh my gosh, all these acronyms. Essentially, you'll be able, if you work in the government and your husband works in the government, this was largely for State Department, you'd be able to take your job abroad. And so military spouses now are able to participate in that program as well. So if we can take your job abroad when your spouse, and I was about to say husband, but I understand either side of the aisle, men, women can take their jobs abroad and continue working wherever they are. There are, I think, some different strict rules depending on the clearances on that, but that is something here that we're doing, and we're also starting to benchmark. So we really want those military spouses to start identifying. I believe there are about 16,000 spouses in the federal workforce. So we're starting to kind of dig deeper. And I just got some information back from a roundtable that the White House was doing. And so one of the biggest things for federal military spouse, federal employees, I also can't speak today, Kayla. And so one of the biggest things that they speak about there is reemployment. We hear people who leave their jobs at one level, and whenever they come back, they're severely underemployed from where they were, right? So it's really hard to get back to that job. And so others are leave without pay. Again, you have to work somewhere for at least a year to be able to participate in your FMLA leave or even buy into your leave that you get from your employer, right? So there's always a risk of losing your job. We know everything goes crazy as soon as they deploy. Just what happens. Murphy's Law just rears its ugly head every time. And so if you've only been at a job for 6 months, asking for that time off is really painful. So
Absolutely. So in your position, you get to work with a lot of these programs and get the first touch on, what's going on, some initiatives, give some insight, especially, you face some of these challenges to yourself. Um, what gets you excited about new policies and initiatives that are coming through, right? Like you've mentioned a few, and I think which one you're going to lean to. But out of all of the things that are going on right now, what are you most excited about that you feel that if it was in place years ago that, could have helped you in many ways?
that is a really good question. It's so hard because change, and I've like studied social movements and change for a large portion of my life, and I know that it's slow. So hitting a lot of walls sometimes is very frustrating. For a while there, we were looking at options for leave without pay for all military spouses and seeing where we can go with that, and how we can start investigating different types of discrimination for military spouses. So having those conversations and having others acknowledge that. Here at Labor, I thought I was being punked when I started because everyone was very interested in helping military spouses, and I had never thought that anyone really cared. And that sounds terrible, but that was one of those things where you're like, yeah, of course we're here and we're trying to work, but I didn't really think others saw us, right? And I think that's so important, is just to tell a military spouse, I see you struggling, and you're doing these things. So that gets me excited, knowing that people are paying attention. But what really, really gets me excited is when I get to impact just one family, right? Like when I'm able to see the different systems that are in place and see that they have an issue and just kind of help them navigate through it. I just helped someone with their VA benefits. They were stuck in a loop, and I was, able to like tell them where to go, who to talk to exactly, and what questions to ask. And they were able around Christmas time to actually get some back pay for some serious illnesses that their families were facing. So, it really is little things and clearing up some of those issues. But yeah, that's really it.
That's an awesome answer, Karla. That was fantastic. All right. So what kind of advice can you give to a military spouse that can help put them in a better position as they, start to journey into finding a new career or seeking out that, meaningful career path?
So I know what's really difficult, and it was for me too. I think there's a lot of stigma surrounding a military spouse, right? And we joke about it. They're called dependas, or my most favorite one that I heard recently, and it's not really a favorite one, triceratops, as if we married all this for all the free health care and sitting on the couch all day and not wanting to do, yeah, right? It's a little funny. But there's a stigma that we're just like a leech onto the government, I think, sometimes. And so when we see programs designed for veterans that also are there to support military spouses, I think it gives us pause. And we don't want to go and be the only military spouse in the room and look like we're taking those resources away from veterans, which we're not, right? They get funding for military spouses, and I just want to encourage military spouses to please lean into them. I assure you the funding that's going into them is also for you. People are very much interested in helping you and supporting you, upskilling, reskilling you, and getting you those good jobs. That's really important right now. And the ball is in our court. There are many jobs out there that are available. I think like over 600,000 cybersecurity jobs. If you have that mentality that you want to do some cyber stuff, you're good to go, right? Someone's going to hire you and they don't care where you move because they need you that bad. So I definitely want to encourage, just lean in, learn to tell your story. You are smart, intelligent. We know this. I was just looking at the stats today. I think we are definitely underemployed, overeducated. The assistant secretary likes to take my quote: when we're not working, we're learning, we're getting certifications. What can I get that's going to get me that longevity? But I really want spouses to stop and think about, why are you getting this degree and why are you getting this certificate? Get some personal satisfaction out of that as well, and make sure that you're networking. But there are a ton of resources out there to help military spouses.
Absolutely. And you bring up a great point, right? Like there's a lot of programs and things that specifically the verbiage says veterans, right? And I know in our case too, with GI Job, some of the resources that we supply, they're for the entire military community, with the word veterans attached to it. So I think it's just kind of asking the questions, right? And finding out if those resources, 9 times out of 10, they are, unless it's like some very specific legislation that's written for a very specific population, right? But for the most part, those programs are open to the entire military community. And I think you bring up a great point. It's important to, highlight that and ask. So you mentioned there is a boatload of resources, because there are, and it can be very challenging to navigate and figure out which of those resources, is right for you. And not everyone is going to be right for everything, right? Not everything is going to be right for everyone. But in your opinion, what do you think are sort of the top three? And you can go more than three if you want to, but sort of the top programs that you feel provide a tremendous amount of value, and are able to bring cohorts in and connect them to other resources or have value in the resources that they're offering themselves.
Yeah, so I would say start with the ENPP partners, right? Our ENPP partners, you can see them all on our website. Each of them, as I Ivan likes to say, they're in different buckets. They each do their own thing. I think we have about 60 partners. We fully vet them through a third-party contractor that goes through and makes sure how legitimate they are, and making sure that they are serving the community and doing what they say they're going to do. My favorite ones are the wraparound services ones. So there's a single point of entry and they will bring you the resources that you need. So that's going to be your Combined Arms, your Hire Heroes USA, Hiring Our Heroes. And the other ones that I also love are our apprenticeship programs. People don't speak enough about apprenticeships. You don't need to get a degree. We are very much in the skills-based learning environment. We are actually always talking to the White House about how can we remove degree requirements for cyber, so that we can start getting people into these roles. You can get a certification. It's a lot of on-the-job training, and Department of Labor has a whole host of intermediaries that help you figure that out. So there's a fall. They'll definitely connect you with some. We have helmets to hard hats, of course, and I mean, there's a whole plethora. I can't even think of them all, but they're all there to help you and make sure that this is the right fit for you as well. So we're always looking for new partners. So anyone out there that's interested in partnering with us, I always say it's the closest you can get to TAP in those military spouses. So
Carl, you hit the nail on the head. I need like a winner button. So every time you say, those are great resources that you named, right? And you talked about apprenticeships, which I want to get into. I think that, with AI making an impact on the workforce and the future changes that AI will have on the workforce, apprenticeships are going to be sought out, right? And some of the career paths that go along with apprenticeships, you may find are going to be a little bit more popular, because we have, such a lack of individuals who are participating in some of those careers that it's going to create a strain. Electricians, for example, right? Who would think? But can you talk a little bit more about what that apprenticeship program looks like and some of the initiatives that are in place for, military spouses, or the military community, when it comes to apprenticeships?
yeah, and so apprenticeship really is for everyone and anyone. We do a big conversation that we have here often is the licensing pieces of that for what is it, the acknowledgement of licensing that happened in the military. I don't think, and this is more veteran speak, but a lot of people don't realize that doesn't translate well into the civilian world. A lot of times they come out and they start over. A lot of our apprenticeship programs account for that, and they try to get them out of apprentice stage as fast as possible into that journeyman, so that they're not held back further in their own careers, which also impacts their families, right? And then as far as military spouses goes, well, you can use your GI Bill when you do apprenticeship, and it is earn while you learn. But then you can also collect that BAH that comes with it if there is a moment where you do need to take a step back and earn a little more while you're getting your education and getting pipelined into those jobs. So the apprenticeship programs, I love them. They're really great. And Carolyn is the one who can speak apprenticeships all day. And we can definitely do a whole thing on that one day too. I give it no justice. I don't do enough justice to it, but one of the biggest conversations around here is definitely the future of work and what are we going to do with these AI items that are coming. So some of the stuff that we're steeped in and reading about and trying to get caught up on, the assistant secretary has been asked to do a lot of different speaking engagements on this. And we're like, what does AI mean? What jobs are there in AI? So anything from just like thinking about the ethics behind AI and who is feeding AI these different things and who's going to be the judge on that. Making sure that we are in a culture of always wanting to learn and change. AI is changing drastically and quickly. We went from talking about cyber nonstop, and now we're talking about AI nonstop. And how do those go hand in hand, right? And getting those individuals into those different jobs. We're going to need data scientists. It's a lot, and it's definitely upskilling and reskilling our current workforce to keep up with the need of that. So we're on it.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Absolutely. It's a big task, right? Like AI is definitely going to change the landscape of employment, like nobody's business. And a lot of the career paths that we think are popular now, in 10 years probably will be non-existent because of the advances from AI. So I appreciate that. And, we could probably have another 5 hours on AI in the workforce. Move on from that. Um, there's when you look at, back to some of like the challenges, things and resources and, there's a lot to wrap your head around, right? And I think that sometimes coming into something new, or even when you're coming out of the military, or even just marrying someone from the military and just becoming a military spouse, there's a whole nother bucket of things that you don't think of, right? That can kind of maybe cause roadblocks for someone. So Karla, in your opinion, again, how can we address some of those roadblocks, or what are some of those roadblocks that maybe a new military spouse may encounter that she's not thinking of, or a spouse like yourself who's come out and, ready to start a successful career? I know that's a lot. I threw a lot in there, but
we'll work through it. We'll work through it. Reading a lot of the data recently, it's the enlisted E1 to E4s are the ones that I think they're looking at a 31% unemployment rate, right? And it's thinking through who are those individuals? Are they on the younger side? Where did they come from? Where are they stationed? I think I just read there are about close to 50 bases that are considered remote and rural in different areas. So where are you living? And do you have access to a job? Do you not? Do you have your education? Did you finish your education? And so those E1 to E4 are always on my minds because they're also food insecure. I think 25% of enlisted families are food insecure. And there's, again, stigma surrounding asking for assistance and food assistance. And so that's something that we always think about. And again, you walk into your American Job Center, if you qualify for food assistance, they'll help sign you up for that as well. So first step, always go to your American Job Center and check in and see what programs you can immediately sign up for. We're here to build you up and get you into the workforce, and making sure that you have that job continuity wherever you go. And then on my end, getting out of the military, I didn't get out, my husband did obviously, but making sure that I am taking advantage of those different programs that are out there. That was the biggest thing. When my husband got out, I had already gone through all of them I was so desperate to find a job when I was in San Diego. I had a security clearance. I was unemployed for about a year and a half. There was a lot of crying in the closet and hiding from children because I couldn't find anything. And we are, some of us definitely tie our identity into, and our self-worth into those different things. And so that was a really difficult thing, but I did find a lot of help in these programs. They definitely do want to help military spouses. And help set you apart. But when my husband got out, I remember he got home when he was doing his TAP program or class, and he was just like, I'm going to have to pay someone to write my resume. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, there are all these nonprofits that will just write your resume for you. And he just was like, what do you mean? And so I introduced him to the different nonprofits out there. That definitely helped him as well. So educating yourself means you're going to help your family on the back end as well. And it's going to be a forever thing. I have people who come to me all the time still asking, like, what nonprofit can help me do this or that. And so it sticks with you and you want to help others.
Absolutely. All right. So so that same family line, right? You used to write for military spouse. And some of the pieces you were not shy about your opinion around Navy culture, and veteran suicide. So has your outspokenness in those areas helped you advance things at DOL Vets, or had an impact at DOL Vets, or with some of the programs or partners that you work with?
Yeah, it's really funny you mentioned that because military spouse was paying me during that time to write articles when I couldn't find a job. So thank you for that. That really, one, was an outlet for me, and two, really, kept some lights on and some occasional Chick-fil-A for the children. And it was a
Everybody loves Chick-fil-A, Karla.
Oh, that's true. Sorry, whoever out there. And that's not an endorsement from Department of Labor for anyone. So just throwing that out there. But it definitely helped me out a few times. And so it gave me an outlet, one, and two, when I was working in the congressman's office, I saw a lot of different things. And one of those was meeting different spouses, Gold Star spouses. And it was really front and center for me how many spouses were experiencing their veteran taking their own life, what it meant for their bottom line, and how information wasn't always being shared accurately to those individuals, right? And so what I always love to say is that all these systems, they were never designed for a military spouse, but we're all asked to navigate within those systems. And if you want to learn, if you want to hear about someone who has to learn something on the fly in a new lingo, like hire a military spouse, we're going to jump in and try to figure it out. But these systems weren't designed for us. We were asked to step into them. And then when the service member is gone and you no longer have the sponsor, it's even harder to navigate those systems, right? How do you have that connection anymore? And these are things that people don't talk about. And I really like to bring that up and bring that to the table when we discuss different things. And one of my previous roles, and I like to say that my resume rivals Barbie's because I've had a million different random jobs, like writing for military spouse. I was a teacher. I don't know if I should have done that one though. And then the other thing I was a policy analyst and researcher, and I was looking at insider threat and how do we do security clearances. And the number one reason and stressor is money and financial, like people sell secrets or want to turn on their government because they can't afford to keep the lights on, right? And so why wouldn't we help support, again, the whole family to ensure national security and recruitment and retention, and making sure that, it's like I said, it's a little thing with a huge impact. So
You can change anything and everything, right? Where do you see these programs, if it was the apple, right, the shining rock, being in 10 years? Like where could the most value come the quickest, right? And if you could have that golden standard of programs, what would they look like in 10 years? Crazy question, but I gotta ask.
crazy. For one, it's like, again, it's going to have to start with legislation, and that's been one of my biggest hurdles and roadblocks here. And I think I actually wrote about this, like a military spouse didn't become a military spouse until DOD said so, right? Until they said, okay, we acknowledge you are following the service member around, we're going to have to deal with you. And then that's when things started to change, in military spouses were getting health care and they were getting PCS with their service member, and all these different things were starting to fall in line. In a perfect world, we would now want to put in legislation, and I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't because I'm not in charge of that, but in a perfect world, putting us somewhere and codifying us so that we can actually study this, right? A lot of times people come to us and they're like, why aren't you studying this? We're like, there's no funding for it because it's not in legislation. And it goes down this kind of rabbit hole of we're nowhere in legislation to talk about. We're not even protected. So you can't put different things into place. So right now it really is up to the nonprofits and the community just to, out of the goodness of their heart, be nice to military spouses. And we really rely on that. So being acknowledged and being seen, I think is going to be the biggest change for us.
Absolutely. And you bring up a great point, right? Chris always says if the Navy wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one, right? So with that being said, how do we help support the community so that we are helping change that dialogue, right? And that we are helping spouses to be heard. So what do you feel that we can do to help the community?
I think a lot of it is going to be just education. I talk a lot about microaggressions again across all marginalized areas. And for military spouses, it's the way we talk about them. Oh, you're just a spouse. Like, okay, yes, I'm just a spouse, right? Or the dependopotamus thing or the triceratops thing. Yeah, it's all well, good, and funny, but also we're real human beings and we really just want a job. Um, some of the conversations I have on the Hill with different people, I remember someone was like, well, if we do this thing, how will military spouses take advantage of that? And I'm like, wow, like, we're not, yeah. So it's like
How do
these
you
different,
really feel?
exactly. And we just heard this recently from another member who, again, we need to turn the tide on that, right? We need to modernize our legislation. We need to modernize what we're trying to do now. Um, I think only 37%, I believe that was the Blue Star Family's number, what they would recommend military lifestyle to a friend. Only 37% of military families would do so. And citing like the financial issues and the military spouses not being able to find a job. Again, it's a small, tiny thing to do that would have a huge impact. And I'm just kind of working towards that. So yeah. I don't even remember what the question was, Kayla.
No worries. That's all great, right? You pretty much answered the question. But it was really what can we do to help change the dialogue, that's currently happening and how do we raise awareness around some of these issues and help support the community, and change that narrative. So if there's anything you
Yeah.
want to
And
add.
so, and I think the assistant secretary, when he was doing this for joining forward assistance for veterans, his biggest thing was training the trainer. Get managers ready to work with veterans. And what does that look like, right? What can we do now to prepare to hire a military spouse? And we go around the country and we talk to different businesses. Some of the greatest best practices we've seen is the leave without, not even without pay. They're like, hey, here's some extra leave because we know things might go wonky or something is weird. If you are PCSing, you can take your job with you out the door. And we know that's possible because hello, COVID, right? So we know you can take that position and giving the time off during a PCS, just being an understanding of that lifestyle. At the end of the day, I think, and I always say this, military spouses, we're fighting to work. And everyone should have access and the opportunity to like hold it down and have a job. That's also Karla Langham's opinion, but don't look at us as, I don't want to say like, sucking whatever from government, taking so much from government when we really just want to turn around and contribute to society. So
Absolutely. Through the military friendly employer survey and the spouse employer survey, we ask employers a lot of questions, right, to help them sort of get ideas on how they can shape those programs to help better support military spouses. One of those things is offering, leave pay to those who may be PCSing or allowing them to take their, job overseas or allowing them to take their job, wherever they may end up for that PCS. And I think employers are becoming a lot more open and receptive to that, especially since COVID helped shine light on how our workforce can be remote. So what advice do you have for, employers or companies or military spouses who are advocates out there, in the employment landscape to help those employers, establish programs like that?
yeah, so we know ERGs are super important to kind of spreading that message and just building that community within. And learning, just sit and listen and learn from military spouses or those different communities that you do have within different ERG groups. So even if it's just the military or veteran community ERG, just throw in family or military spouse name to it as well to make it more inclusive. But just I think a lot of times military spouses aren't shy. If you ask, well, what is it that you need? Oh, let me tell you what I need. And this is how you can help support me. And I also encourage military spouses to tell that story of a lot of times people are just like, I didn't know that those were the different things you were going through. Like it didn't even occur to me that, so-and-so was pregnant and you had to take him to the hospital or be by their side. So all these little things that people just take for granted, I should say, they don't realize that. So just really listening and trying to understand the different needs. And hey, especially when you're a caregiver or you become a caregiver, what does that look like for you and how can we help you set you up for that? So there's a lot that goes on in the military community, as you know. So
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot there. And I think, education, like you said, is number one, and asking those questions, right? If nobody asks, they don't know. And if nobody knows to tell because nobody asks, then we're stuck in a repetitive cycle of we're not getting anywhere here, right? So be proud, tell your story. Um, and I know we're coming up on time, but I would just want to touch a little bit on entrepreneurship, right? And so entrepreneurship pathways have become a lot more popular, right? Because you can, set what that career looks like for yourself. So can you tell us more about some of the initiatives that you know about there and some of the programs to help military spouses be successful in entrepreneurship?
yeah, so I believe, what is it? Is it AMC? I hope I'm saying that right. Or, Moni will come get me. But, her program is super helpful. Okay. And, we recently started engaging more with her and what's going on. We recently had an entrepreneurship roundtable, and we wanted to bring in those different voices, military spouse voices, to have these discussions more openly about what is it that you face? What are you seeing? And again, military spouses, they don't hold back about what they need. And I think one of the biggest conversations we're having now is how can we support them? How can we make sure that people are using these military businesses as a choice, right? For their own business, like contracting, I should say. I like to say I have a few LLCs out there just in case I needed them to be a subcontractor or a contractor. And was very fascinating to me. I wound up being a subcontractor when I was a policy analyst. I happened to know the person who was hiring, and she called me. She's like, I this is going to sound weird, but I don't really care that you're Mexican. I love that you're Mexican, but can you make sure you put that in your paperwork because we get a benefit from that, right? Because you're a woman and you're a minority owned business. So how great would it be if we could add also a military spouse owned business because we have veteran owned businesses, right? And so making it also their own to be able to be a part of and getting some sort of, again, it's a small number, right? It's not a huge number. So being able to support them that way and
It's
hiring.
a powerful number. It's a very
Yeah.
powerful number, right? The military spouse community is probably the biggest group of the strongest women and men that I know, right? There are some powerhouses. So it's a very, very strong community.
It is very
Entrepreneurship can
strong.
be a great path.
I
Absolutely.
agree. I
And
agree with you.
I'm sorry, Karla. I couldn't hear you. You cut out.
Oh, I just said I agree 100%.
Oh, we need another winner button. With military spouses and entrepreneurship, a lot of spouses are heading that way, and I think it's helping them speak a lot more right about the things that they need. And that also bleeds into some of the, career opportunities and advancements and things. And supplier diversity is huge. Do you see or feel or think that, in the future that military spouses will be a part of those supplier diversity conversations, as we move to, recognizing the military spouse community more?
I would like to think so. And there was a roundtable discussion that I was at where it came up. And, SBA was there, the Small Business Administration was there, and they were just like, this is all very interesting ideas. I'm pretty sure it's not the first time they've heard of it, but I think as we are trying to support military families more, and there's definitely going to be more of those conversations for sure. So
That's exciting to hear. Well, Karla, thank you so much for taking the time out today and joining us for this interview. You are fantastic. You are a wealth of knowledge, resources, and provided so much valuable information. So we hope that our community, can take from that and use your experiences and the things that you've shared to help better their career paths and find those resources that can help them. So thank you very much, Karla. We appreciate you.
thank you so much. I appreciate you, Kayla, and all you do.
Any last words of advice before we are out?
Keep on trucking. You're doing amazing, and please be your number one advocate, especially with the licensing stuff. It's a brand new law, so make sure that you arm yourself with all the information when you walk into American Job Center. Know your rights. Again, being a part of a smaller group, a mighty group, but a small group, a lot of people aren't aware of the laws that are out there, and they may turn you away at first. Just be your biggest advocate, and that's it.
Thank you again. To all of you, we hope that, again, this information was valuable to you. And if we can be a resource to support you in any way, please let us know. Thank you.